order the Town of Corte Madera Climate Action Committee special meeting for Wednesday, May 31st. We'll take the roll call.
Yes. Committee member Wall.
Unmuted and here.
Committee member Simon.
Here.
Committee member Foster is not present. Committee member Alden, you actually don't need your mic. We have the owl today, so you can just hear. Thank you. Vice Chair Rose here and Chair Johnson.
Should we do the salute for the flag? Martin, you can stay seated if you choose. I
To the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
look at the meeting minutes from April 19 meeting. Anybody have any comments on the meeting minutes? Any, do you have a? You want to approve them?
Johnson, should we have an open time for?
I'm sorry, jumping the gun. Sorry. Open time for public. Do we have any public?
We do not see any hands raised in the public.
No? That's just a point. That was fun when we had a public person.
No, I think I was, of course, a member of the public that
Yeah,
time,
you were
but there was someone else who was here who I
Yeah.
thought made really good comments.
Does any comments on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
second.
All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Approved. General business discussion of renovation of a renovation reach code and community feedback. How'd that go? I missed the meeting. Adam?
Yeah, so that's what this item is going to be, an update on the community workshop, the feedback that we received, and then asking for your feedback on the same policy options that were presented at the community workshop. So I just have a brief presentation. Hopefully everyone was able to review the slides that were included in the agenda packet. And maybe you saw the video, maybe you didn't. You're having some technical difficulties there, but it'll be up soon if you didn't yet see it. So the workshop was focused on the model codes that Marin County developed last year, and specifically the renovation components, and that the town has not yet adopted. Sorry, I shared the wrong screen. Try that again.
I was on the video for the second part, and I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, glad some of you were able to attend. And so these were the policy options that were presented. There's one column for each of the 3 model codes that were developed by Marin County. And the first row on here is the sort of status quo. So Corte Madera has already adopted the all electric requirement for new construction. We currently don't have any additional requirements for single family renovations. And for EV charging infrastructure, there's requirements for new construction only, but not for renovation. So in the first column, there's some additional requirements that we're considering that are technically would apply to remodels, but they're in the spirit of the all electric new construction ordinance. So that's why they're in in that column. The first is to expand the definition of new construction to include substantial renovations, and staff are still working out exactly what that definition would be, but approximately 50% demolition of an existing building would then be considered a new building for the purpose of this ordinance and would be required to be all electric. And that's in line with what other jurisdictions are doing that have these all electric new construction requirements. Many of them have this 50% threshold. The second policy in that column is one that the city of San Rafael has adopted, preventing the expansion of natural gas in existing mixed fuel homes. So the types of projects that this would prohibit would be, for example, adding a new gas fireplace, adding any kind of new piped in gas appliance. And the purpose of that is just to be a little bit more fair in how we're applying this all electric policy as it currently is. If it's a new building, there's no gas allowed, but remodels are allowed to extend their gas use, and there's no limit on that. And it also would help limit investment in gas infrastructure, which, as we all know, will need to be decommissioned at some point. So in the second column, that's looking at single family renovations, the energy savings code, and the county's model code has these two components, the mandatory components, and then the energy savings score, which there's a flexible compliance table to meet that target energy savings score. And so the options here are to either adopt just the mandatory requirements, which are efficient lighting, LEDs, and photo sensors, and the electric readiness requirements, or to adopt the entire model code, including that target energy savings score with the flexible compliance table. And there's some additional modifications that the town can make to that flex compliance table, such as modifying the threshold. The county sets it at 750 square foot of a renovation. That's the project level that's required to comply. Fairfax is the only other jurisdiction so far that has adopted this, and they lowered the threshold to 200 square feet. I believe Tiburon is the other jurisdiction that has had a first reading of the ordinance, and they are sticking with the 750 square foot. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of permit data to tell us exactly how many projects would be affected at each level. We're just not currently tracking the square footage of projects in a way that makes it easy to find for this kind of data analysis. So our estimate is that the 750 threshold would affect about 30 projects a year. And we would assume that number would go up the lower the threshold and vice versa.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? 30 projects if it's at 750?
Yeah, that's our best estimate.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the EV charging is just whether or not we want to adopt those requirements for renovations. Are there any questions on any of these policies? Are there any you'd like me to go into in more detail before we get to the community feedback in the workshop?
Was it, I'll start, was it presented how area was going to be measured? I know that's been a contentious issue. Like if you do it, if a window in a room gets changed, does that room count?
Right, yeah, so in that scenario, no, the window replacements would not count. What would be counted would be removing, it would be standardized with how fire determines modified space for the purpose of whether fire sprinklers are required or not. And so their code mentions removing wall covering. So if drywall was removed from a whole wall, that, or how it is actually, I think 3 feet out from that wall would be counted. If the whole wall was removed, then the square footage of both rooms, for all rooms affected by that wall removal, would be counted. And if it's less than 12 square feet of drywall, so you're just cutting a couple holes in the wall, that wouldn't count. So smaller changes wouldn't count, but the larger ones, yes. And that was presented in some level of detail at the trial.
I have a question about the reach code policy options. Where did that come from? Is those are the options? Are those the only options that we are looking at?
Those are the options that were presented during the workshop. So once we get to the portion asking for your feedback, if you have other options that you want staff to consider.
Yeah, I think they're certainly based on the county's process of how they went about developing reach codes for new construction, but also for renovation. So that was the starting point in the baseline. And the other within each category there, these were sort of, I think, obvious sort of, I think, areas to that we felt sort of triggered different levels of sort of aggressiveness in terms of electrification, and sort of obvious ones in which to sort of point out. And so for workshop purposes, it sort of presented a spectrum of how far to go, you know, more, because you can go into great detail and fine tune this and that and the other, but these were sort of broader categories to really dig in.
I looked at the workshop. I couldn't attend it, but I looked at the video of the workshop. Did we get any responses based on that?
So they're not. I wanted just to follow on what you said, Adam. I believe that what was presented to the council last fall was basically this same format and structure. And we, at that time as a committee, well, as individuals serving on the committee, recommended that the council adopt the full reach code as defined by the county.
Right.
And my recollection is that went with what you presented, but I do believe that council member at the time, Mayor Beckman, asked staff to investigate and come back with a proposal to get all the way through to what the county had proposed. So, you know, the level C, or what, however you want to define that or call that out, that we would get all the way to aligning with the county and adopting the full reach codes. Is that your recollection as well?
Councilmember Beckman may have, I didn't go back to those meetings, but he may have requested that we do that. But again, I think the most significant part of that request was to go do outreach and listen to the community and get some feedback and have a process to discuss where we should, you know, where the appropriate landing spot would be with respect to, obviously we already had the new construction, so this is adding a couple more nuances to that. The renovations was specifically what was discussed with the council back in November, because the county had adopted that or put that forward as a model reach code for single family renovations, and at the time staff was recommending to do some more outreach on that. So that center one was sort of the focus of those discussions at that time, as well as I think EV charging came up as a point to sort of discuss how, you know, do some outreach. But I think there was generally support for moving something forward. It was sort of like, you know, I think we brought up the fact that a discussion around 750 square feet, like that threshold, seems to be a big question that we need to answer for our community. And you can see that other communities have sort of settled, Fairfax sort of went a different direction on that. And so it doesn't have to be exactly the same. That makes it, you know, easier if it is, but.
Yeah, and my recollection too is that there was some concern about really for staff to really drill down into the details and understand and calculate what the impact would be on staff. That you wanted to make sure that if the council voted to approve the full reach code that you could actually implement it. So I'm just wondering where you guys are on that.
Well, we haven't, obviously, I think the first thing is developing an ordinance, but certainly I think we'll be fine with wherever we go. Well, training would be involved, obviously, with inspectors and most importantly with education at the front counter and making sure people are aware, but that's part of something that Phoebe's, we've talked to staff about it, well, and that would just have to be part of the program that we get involved.
I understood that there was some feedback during that time that it would be problematic for staff to deal with something that was involved square footage and was difficult to go down the checklist.
We're getting, I don't know if we want to go into it, but
I
just
think
real
what
quick.
Phoebe I think what people want to do is hear what the
Yeah.
public said first, and then we can.
Yes.
And then we can chew on it a little
I
bit.
agree. Yeah.
So let's bring the public voice into this conversation.
Yeah, so any other questions on the substance of these policy options before I get into that?
No.
Okay, so this was we had the community workshop was last Wednesday at 7. Before the workshop, we sent out physical mailers to all Corte Madera residents, posted on town social media, that had articles in the newsletter. There was at the tabling event at the farmer's market, talked to people about it. Had a notice on the reader board and sent out notices as well to several local architect and building community groups. Despite all that outreach, we didn't get a lot of attendance at the workshop. We had a few people here in person and a few more on Zoom. It was recorded and people have been watching the recording, although right now it's down for some technical issues. And we did have some comments during the workshop, as well as we asked attendees to fill out a survey about their thoughts on those options. And that survey is still being promoted in the town newsletter. And we'll have it up for a little bit longer to see if we get any more feedback online. Overall, the feedback that we did get so far was supportive of all of the code updates, especially the EV readiness requirements. And a majority of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with each of the requirements. This is out of 9 responses, so I think it was a little bit of assault. And these were some of the comments we received about requiring EV readiness and supporting them. Some of the concerns we got, I don't think will be a surprise, or concerns about the grid capacity and reliability with the electrification measures, and concerns about the cost of the requirements, especially for seniors and people on fixed incomes. We did get some suggestions and things that the public wanted staff to consider. One was to inform all applicants about these upgrades, even if they don't meet the threshold. That's something that this committee has already been talking about, and we're working on getting some more information about green building projects at the counter. And then on the EV requirements, we had some comments about some people wanting to increase the requirements for multifamily renovations, even beyond what the county's model code requires. And then also some concerns about the cost of level 2 EV readiness versus level 1. Yeah, for now. So before we get into discussion, we want to open for public comment or any other questions from the committee.
I was just going to comment on the feedback that you've received to date. It feels it would be interesting to publish that outside of this forum, perhaps in the Chronicles, just to let people know this is where this is headed. This is the public feedback so far. That might elicit more responses or feedback. Just a suggestion.
And maybe we could bump it up on the list, you know, the links to the various notices on the Chronicles on Friday. It's sometimes I think we're sort of, the committee's work is a little bit lower down. This is something we really want to engage people on. And is there a way to get it on the website? Like a QR code or, I mean, like, but like really visible, not several clicks away from the homepage.
Yeah, we can get that survey on the front page.
Yeah, and I just think noting some of the stats might trigger someone to go, oh, interesting, like I agree or I disagree, and I'm gonna take the survey. Because on the surface, it might not be super clear what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a suggestion.
Can you remind me how the county code works with, or how it affects multifamily renovations?
So the counties, that portion of the code that requires additional energy savings only affects single family renovations. The only requirements in here that would apply to multifamily are the EV readiness requirements. And those are for projects that are modifying the parking lot surface or upgrading their service panel. Then they'd be required to install some EV readiness measures.
Just readiness?
Yeah, so I have that slide somewhere.
And there was a public comment for that.
Yeah, go further.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if they're modifying the service panel, the requirement is to install have the electrical capacity for 20% of on-site parking spaces to be level 2 EV at some point in the future. So just the panel capacity. If they're modifying the parking lot surface, so the curbing or the paving, the requirement is to install conduit to 50% of exposed parking spaces, or the other option is conduit to 20% and charging stations to 5% of the exposed parking spaces.
So maybe we just set the context for us today, but in your outreach, in your program, where are we and what do you need from this body today for forward progress in the decision-making process by council?
Yeah, so we're hoping to get your feedback on sort of the same questions that we asked the community, which is which of these options, and I can go back to that slide, does the committee support? And then once we pass that bar, there's some additional questions about the specific policies and where certain thresholds should be set and whether there should be exemptions to any of them.
But is this the last time that we get to discuss this before it goes to council? I'm trying to remember the
No.
timeline.
So yes, sorry, here's the next steps.
Okay.
After this meeting, staff will be working to draft either a draft ordinance or at least a framework of the elements that would be included in an ordinance. Then it would go to the planning commission for their comments, and then it will come back to this committee for your recommendation before going to council.
So just from your report, it goes to the planning commission on June 27th, back to us on July 19th, and to the council on August 15th. David.
Got it. All right.
Is it up there? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Sorry. Yeah, that's the tentative schedule. So we have so far.
So I think if we discuss that, if you pull up the questions, if we discuss those and get through as much of it as we can, it seems like there's some room here if we needed to come back on a couple of things. Is that fair?
Well,
No.
no, sure, of course, yeah. I mean, there's always comments. So I think, put it another way, I think what we're looking for is either there's some specific questions that I think the idea was like, we wanted to hold a workshop, get some public feedback and input into the process. You never know how many people are going to show up. You never know how many responses you're going to get. You want then this committee to consider what has been said and heard.
Yeah.
Also think about the goals, that this committee has already, it's basically the mission of this, committee and its purpose. And sort of overlay those two and come up with some recommendations and guidance for staff to go back and start to work on an ordinance that would include X, Y, and Z, right? With the goal, obviously on a timeline, and so this is where it becomes really important. It's like, not already, committee member Simon, I already know, your leading question of like, yes, you could open up the world here and start from scratch and go into multifamily, you could go into a variety of commercial development and just keep going and going in terms of electrification. But at some point, we have to get to an ordinance. And so I think that's where it's important to go back to where we were back in the fall in the council's direction about really the goal here was to take the REACH code for single family remodels that the county had adopted, as well as the EV readiness sort of REACH code that the county had adopted, and really run that through a public process. And that was staff was recommending as well. Certainly there's a room to like, I think, add here and there but I just want to caution not to like get too far astray. Otherwise we'll never get to sort of an endpoint here and actually accomplish what we need to accomplish. I think it's also important to recognize, the longer we go, the closer we are to the next code cycle update from the building code. So, it is important that we try to sort of think of it as like a funnel or something like that, where we start over here. We're trying to sort of narrow this into an actual language and text that we can adopt. So I think this is a good opportunity to have the feedback, and then there will be a drafting, and that will be of an ordinance. Certainly that's that other meeting, I think it was in July, would be when we would be asking for an actual action from the committee to make a recommendation to the town council that there could be additional things that go along with that. So that's room for comment, but it is starting to be more formalized at that point in terms of what the actual recommendation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm just curious if, like, some of the questions that the public raised, certainly around costs presented to fixed income, like that's not something we're gonna potentially solve here if it impacts it. So that's why I was asking, like, how much wiggle room. I'm not suggesting we add new things to it.
Just to interject here, it seems like this body should be having this discussion that's reviewed through the lens of the climate action plan. And so, Phoebe, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. So, through the lens of the climate action plan, can we go back to the options? What would the climate action plan, if the reason why this body was created was to implement and to have action on the climate action plan, where would that land?
Well, none of these policy options are actually in the climate action plan. We've already.
There's a vector there.
Yeah, we've already gone past what was in the climate action plan in terms of the green building policies that are in the cap. Certainly these get us further towards the greenhouse gas reduction goal. The natural gas use in buildings is 19% of emissions. So that's the section that this is targeting. But there's nothing actually in the cap that's as specific as these.
Right. But when we established this committee, the vision we had was carbon neutral, and that pushes us.
Yeah. The only question I have really is that the box that isn't locked down and out this single family renovation energy savings third row, because it says with or without modifications, kind of squirrely, huh?
Yeah, so the modifications there, if we adopt it as the county has it, that's the 750 square foot threshold. What we had discussed was instead of having how the county has with each climate zone has a different target energy score. That would discuss simplifying that to just focus on climate zone 3, which is most of Corte Madera. And the applicants would be required to meet that target score of 6. A potential modification would be to that target energy score, either up or down. The maximum cost-effective score for climate zone 3, I believe, is 13. And then the other potential modifications to the square footage. And those are I think the main 2 modifications that are referenced there.
Do you have any background about why Fairfax went to 200 square feet?
Fairfax, I believe, made that decision based on the data that they had on the size of renovations. And I guess the housing stock there is smaller, or at least the renovation sizes are smaller, so they didn't feel that they had any project over 750 square feet. We definitely do in Corte Madera, we just don't have a solid number on that.
I'd like to add that Fairfax has tended for many, many years to be ahead of everybody else in terms of their intentions around climate book.
Yeah, I think reducing that number to be less than 750 catches more projects.
Sure.
You know, and 200 seems like almost any project would
Trigger.
would trigger it. So there's some simplicity there.
There certainly is simplicity in that. But I think that the devil's in the details, and I, not being a building inspector, I mean, I don't have those numbers to understand where the pinch points would be with the public, with a property owner. And I think that is really important. And yeah, the compliance, the flexible compliance table, I would love for you to go through that, because that's just more than I could get my brain around. And it's like 3 pages. Do you have time to do, can you help us walk through that?
Yeah, I can walk through it briefly. So this is what I was talking about. There's the 2 climate zones in Marin County, and most of Corte Madera is in climate zone 3. So to comply with
When you
this,
say most, what's in climate zone 2? Just the top of the hill or something?
yeah, I think it's actually just north of this road here is.
So
It's a very small
So
sliver of
that
Corte
seems,
Madera.
to me, that seems like a no-brainer. Just call it all 3.
Yeah.
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 So to comply, the project has to reach the target score of 6. And you choose from the options in that list to do that. So the idea is that the homeowner gets to choose based on the scope of their project, what makes the most sense. You could comply by installing all of the efficiency measures, which is the water heating package, air sealing, attic insulation, and new ducts and duct sealing, and then one other 1-point measure, so either the heat pump clothes dryer or the induction cooktop. Or a project could comply by installing one higher value measure, like a heat pump water heater, that gets you to 12 points, and the project complies in that way.
Would you have to remove your existing gas water heater?
Yes. Yeah, so there's a more detailed in the county's checklist. It has some more details on all of these measures. And yes, you would have to remove the gas water heater and cap the gas line you're putting in heat pump.
Question for you guys and for everybody. The goal is to get off of fossil fuels. The goal is to get gas out of our buildings, and also energy efficiency. Obviously, I think that should be obvious anyway. So this point system is really interesting to me, because you could do just one thing. You could, for instance,
Heat pump water.
get a HVAC heat pump, right, for 10 points, and not do anything else. And that doesn't get gas out of the building, and it doesn't help energy efficiency, other than the heat pump furnace would be more energy efficient than what they currently have. So I mean, I get that, you know, I understand the reason for a point system, but how do we actually get gas out of our buildings? And I think that that's a real struggle. And to do it effectively and to do it fairly, equitably, economically. I mean, you know, this is everyone around the Bay and everyone in California is dealing with this question. I haven't seen like the perfect answer, right? This is hard.
Right.
One thing I will say on this though, is that you can see that it's incenting you to make some of those big changes that have probably the biggest impact.
That's a
right?
good point.
So it's like, if you just do the heat pump, you're done, which is great, because that's 40% of the emissions, right? Or even greater. So, well, 70% and 20% of the 70%. So in that sense, it is incenting the behavior we're trying to get people to do. However, yes, they could do all the other things and still hit it without doing one of those big changes.
Right.
Right, so this
What's interesting
isn't
to me-
the sort of be all and end all of building electrification. I think, you know, wherever we end up with this, the countywide electrification plan is going to be looking at the next steps to get to fully electric. And this is not there's no one silver bullet.
The topic that comes, when I talk to people about this, and I ride with some of the planning commissioners, on my bike, gas cooking is the thing that people have the heartburn about.
No pun intended.
And this, and I guess it's if we pursued even even line 3 there, you could easily comply and not change your cooktop. I wonder if that message hasn't gotten across to people.
Do we want it to get across? I mean, I think that, you know, that goes back to, that's really bad education, because having a stove in your kitchen, a gas stove in your kitchen, is a health issue.
I know
It's a safety issue, all of those things, and induction stoves are so much better than either the existing electrical or gas stoves. So that's an education piece. It's a huge health issue. So I just see this as, you know, everyone needs to be doing that education piece, that outreach piece. But from a health standpoint, that's probably the big one. From an energy and getting gas out of our buildings, that's probably lower on, you know, it's going to be water heaters and it's going to be furnaces,
Yeah.
space heating.
So what do we want to accomplish in talking about this table right now? I just want to make sure that we're helping you move on. Like, do we want to know? I think we have a sense of what it is.
Mhm.
Are there questions that we have about it, or can we?
It was just a realization for me that, you know, the big, we aren't being asked to address human health. And I think what Leslie said is
Yeah.
so true and spot on. That, you know, a lot of renovations, I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of renovations that come through the town are probably kitchen redos. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, a bathroom renovation maybe, but if we reduce the area, we pick up more projects that just have a bathroom redo.
Right.
Um,
That's definitely a consideration with some of these measures, like the attic insulation, that's not as relevant for a bathroom remodel. So you're reducing the options and pathways that people have to comply in that case.
Can you repeat that? I'm not quite sure I understand what you just said.
well, if you came in with a small kitchen renovation or a bathroom renovation, it would have to be more than 750 square feet if we use that threshold. And then your project would, if you want to do the energy efficiency route, those things would apply to the entire house.
Right.
So even though your renovation is just affecting a
Portion of your home.
800 square feet, you'd be doing, for 6 points, if you went that route, you'd be affecting the whole house.
right,
Yeah, that's
Right.
the point.
No, under 6, because it's.
Or you pull the trigger and you say, well, my bathroom renovation is going to now include a heat pump.
but I think your point, if I caught it, was that if it's a small kitchen. A renovation of a small kitchen where there's going to be more. Gas impact, right? Was that what you were getting at? That we wouldn't, that there'd be a remodel of a kitchen as opposed to a bath, which you're gonna assume is a little bit smaller than most kitchens. I think that's a safe assumption, that doing that kitchen remodel, if it were less than 750 feet, would not trigger anything, even if they were gutting the kitchen and putting in a wolf range.
That's true. Yeah,
Okay.
my comment was more in line with what Dave was saying, with that with a smaller remodel, less of these measures make sense.
Right,
And so there's less options for the homeowner to comply in a,
Yeah, if somebody decides to remodel a kitchen and put in a $12,000 wolf range, aren't those not going to be allowed in a few years?
2027.
Right.
No, actually,
No,
not at all, not at all. Not
Who-
so.
Always allowed.
Furnaces.
Furnaces and water heaters,
Right.
27 and 29.
So, but a lot of these projects will involve water heaters and furnaces that will be allowed.
Maybe. I mean,
And
maybe. If you're remodeling your-
Feeling pretty miffed if a few years down the road, they have to get rid of their.
If they don't, it's.
They don't, it just,
They don't, they just won't be done.
BAAQD just says that the state is not going to allow these things to be sold.
Okay.
right,
Well, actually,
that was
the statewide, they won't be sold in the state by 2030, in 2030 and moving forward. But the Bay Area Air Quality Management District ruled 9.4, 9.6. We're on that track to prohibit them being sold. Water heaters in 27 and furnaces in 29. So it's 1 to 3 years ahead of the statewide measure.
right.
So if an applicant comes in 2020, and we don't have to worry about this yet, but it's if an applicant comes in and they have something that you can't buy in the state of California in their application, would the town disallow the application? Or can they import something that,
I believe the language is purchase or install
purchase
in the Bay Area, so it would not be.
Good, they got that. Somebody was
Yeah.
smarter than me.
Yeah, so that is the context that I presented at the beginning of the workshop, and these requirements are coming, and these are, some reach codes are one way that we can help prepare for that, and so that's where I think the mandatory measures of the county's code could be really helpful in that way, because there are electric readiness requirements in there for pre-wiring for appliances. So for remodels that are over, here it is, 750. If they include a kitchen remodel, they have to pre-wire for an induction cooktop. If they include a laundry room remodel, they have to pre-wire for an electric clothes dryer. And if it's a service panel upgrade, then they have to choose from a list of electric readiness options. Basically, any appliance, you have to pick 2 and be electric ready for those 2.
Right.
I mean, does the committee find it helpful to go through that, again, the county's sort of reach code in more detail? I'm just wondering if that's helpful or not.
I wish it wasn't so complicated. I wish this was more simple for everybody. And one simple point would be just to adopt what the county has. That would be simple, because it'd be uniform. And maybe this just isn't going to be simple.
Well, when you go back to your questions, can you pull the questions up?
Yeah.
I think in the recommendations that the policy committee put forward and that we all supported, answers point number 1, right? So we're good there. I mean, is that?
So there are these 2 additional options under the all electric new
The
construction.
50% and then
50%
the lighting and what you just shared with us.
and preventing the expansion of natural gas.
Right, okay.
So those are two new ones that I don't believe the committee has discussed before.
So do we want to start there and just see what we think and then move on to the next question? Because I think all of the questions you're asking around, David, around that scorecard and the square footage is really important, but if we all agree with this, then we can get back to that.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that we're revisiting new construction because I thought that was pretty clear.
Well,
Right, so they're sort of under the same column because many jurisdictions include this substantial remodel definition in their all electric new construction code.
What's
It's
the
not-
county? What does the county do for new construction?
The counties is at 75%, but most other jurisdictions that have all electric codes have a 50% remodel.
and I'll just, the additional context here is right now, we just, basically our code says new construction includes any structure that has never been occupied, I think is how it's termed. So it's really like a new building, right? When we talked and we worked, Phoebe Thomas, our building official, and I, you know, we sat down and discussed and we said, well, look, I mean, at some point, if somebody's tearing all but one or two walls down,
Like new construction.
you know, that's essentially a new building. And frankly, you know, the 50% mark at that point, even at 50%, where you're demolishing 50% of the structure, you've opened up enough of the house where getting into the utilities and changing out whether, you know, the gas line or the electrical utilities, it's not a, I mean, that's sort of what we were considering, what's the right, and Thomas was really guiding us on this. When does that become sort of like it's not so hard at that point to sort of cap your gas line, whatever it is, change your utilities and become, you know, not use gas anymore for that structure. Because you've opened the structure up so much at that point. So 50% demolition, currently that doesn't exist. Right now, our new construction, electrification or new construction would literally be like, you know, you're building a new hotel, you're scraping a site, and you're building a new project, you know, a new building. So this is a way to actually capture more new structures, even if it's just like a very extensive remodel, essentially, in that fully electric requirement.
And you have a question?
Does that make sense?
Well, I just wanted to get it clear in my mind, sorry. Row number 1, maintain existing. That's as it is right now.
In our code, yeah.
Okay. 2, row number 2.
It's the indefinite.
Is that in alignment with the fire code for when sprinklers are required?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. They have a slightly different definition, I think, than what we're considering for what would be demolition, but yes, the 50% threshold.
And then line 3 goes beyond that.
The last two options in that column are not mutually exclusive. So I wouldn't say one goes beyond the other, but it's possible to have both of those at the same time because one of them is just saying you can't extend natural gas infrastructure, regardless of how big of size the remodel is, the natural gas piping can't be extended. That's the last policy option.
Like adding a, you know,
Yeah.
line for a gas dryer or a, as you said, a fireplace. That would not be allowed.
Sort of starting to think about where we would locate that rule. It would probably be in the new construction, saying like it's essentially you can't extend the gas line either. Even if you're not doing 50% demolition.
Yeah.
So you're only doing 25% demolition. It's still not gonna allow you to extend your gas line to an outdoor fire.
It's
Right.
it's kind of blending the renovation versus
It-
new construction.
It is, but
You're moving your kitchen over 10 feet?
It's just saying if
Extend the
so-
gas line.
well,
Well, if you had an
that's an
electric
option.
stove, if you had an electric stove and you wanted to move to gas, you were not going to be able to do that.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
a real
So
basic example.
San Rafael is the only city that I'm aware of that has this in their code, and what they say is no expansion of the natural gas infrastructure unless the natural gas use is unchanged or is reduced. So it
Unchanged.
wouldn't apply to if you were
Yeah.
just moving your stove slightly. But if you were increasing natural gas use, that's when it would apply.
And on the 50% demolition, we feel comfortable that if somebody is demoing 50%, they've got the funds to support the electrification.
Change over to a fully electric boat.
The financial argument, I'll show you where I'm at.
Yeah,
The financial argument doesn't really play here because there is no cost difference between gas and electric. With
Gas, the infrastructure is more expensive.
gas, yeah, or, you know, it's,
no, heat pump is more.
No, but adding a gas line.
Oh,
right.
that part is, but.
Yeah,
the
the
actual-
infrastructure is much more expensive. Yeah.
And
than electric.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is it's a common question that comes up, and so I think we need to make
Mhm.
sure we feel
To
comfortable.
your question,
But
yeah,
yeah, so-
50%, I think we were, again, relying on our building expert,
Mhm.
certainly felt that he's, comfortable with defining that as the threshold at which that structure should now be an all electric structure.
Okay,
and I like the alignment with fire code.
Yeah, but you had more that you were gonna say, I think.
No, I think that was it.
I will say the definition, it gets even more granular because it gets into the definition of what demolition had 3 different parts, I think, what we were talking about. How you have to, so you'll see, that's the type of thing where you'll see the actual language, where we come in an ordinance and it will sort of,
Oh.
that becomes the challenge of how you have to think about all these different scenarios and how, what adds up to 50% and over 3 or 5 years. So we're talking about timeframes too, and how you aggregate these levels of remodels or renovations or construction activities on one single structure. Those things we are, to get into more detail.
So
I
do you
like
have
where-
any language around replace on burnout?
No, that's not something that we're considering at this time. That's something that's being evaluated as part of the countywide electrification plan.
And when do we think that's going to be out?
It should be done either end of this year or early next year.
So probably the next code cycle.
Yeah. Interesting, okay. It seems to me that replace on burnout is something that we should be very much in support of. It's not requiring you, no one's gonna come in and take your stove. But when you replace your stove, and obviously people don't get a permit to do that, but that is something that, we should be explaining why this is important. It's not just a bureaucracy that's coming for your stuff. There's reasons behind this that are actually good for your family, your health, and the planet as well.
So let's see if we can, I liked where Amy was going, what do we agree upon? So under all electric new construction, does anybody, and Martin, I know it's hard for you to jump in here because I know what it's like to be the only person not in the room, but so let's give you the first right to respond to my question that
Just a couple.
the bottom 2 rows in the first column, I would advocate for.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
Does anybody disagree with that? Because then we can move on.
I agree with it.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
There were some additional sort of considerations for those 2. Whether there should be any exemptions to those 2 policies.
Because I was hoping we'd do that at the end.
Okay, you want to go through them all first?
Yeah, let's see where we have consensus, then we can look for exceptions that might apply to everything. And then, of course, I'm for the bottom row of the single family renovation column. Does anybody disagree with me?
No, I absolutely concur.
I mean, I want to go further, but, and then the question is just.
We're not going to.
Well, we can with or without modifications, that's the swirling.
Right.
Yeah, and so one area of modification that we've discussed is, there's that target score. That could be, you keep the same framework of how you're actually incentivizing or requiring sort of greater electrification for remodels that meet the threshold, or the threshold is. So those modifications were either related to the threshold we were thinking of, or to this target score in any zone, although that there is some, I would call it some science to the way they actually assign those numbers. It was pretty delicate that, you know, they went with the ones in certain locations and start monkeying around with that, and
For the target score, you could modify the target score.
you could, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, right now it's 6 with the county, because you're trying to get to 6
Level
points.
As,
Not in the zone for Corte Madera, it would be 6, because we're in the cooler.
What was the 8?
It was
That was
Zone
zone
two.
2.
zone 2,
Oh.
I think just, I would propose that calling all of Corte Madera zone 3
Yes.
seems easy for staff and easy for us.
Yeah,
right?
better for.
Yes.
There's very few homes in zone 2. Okay, and so then it's 6 points.
And we take the onus off of them to have to bump up find another 2 points. right?
Because it's
So
more stringent for them, yes.
Right,
And then,
And it's
and then
that one
going
is-
to back to the point.
yeah, we did, we want all the 8.
Yes.
Yeah, we want 8.
Yeah, can we go back to the
Half
point?
to 8,
Yeah.
because all of them.
No, I
that's the big
understand,
one,
no, I understand.
Maybe, can we go back to the point?
Yes,
table?
I'm just. Yes.
So you could do renovation and not change your cooktop in at least 2 different ways.
Mhm.
You could take all the 1s and 2s and keep your wolf range. Or you just do a major appliance.
Right.
Sending a major appliance is a big deal.
Well, the one that's easy, if I was the architect, I'd look at the PV electric ready pre-wire. That's gonna be the least expensive here.
We have to do PV too.
Yeah, in some cases, the existing solar would
Would count.
Good count.
And in the least, it creates awareness, right? It create like with this compliance table. Should also be information about heat pump adoption and incentives and everything, so that there's actually a discussion about these things as way before they're going through approval.
Right. We do have some of that at the counter now.
Yeah.
It's kind of irrelevant to have those numbers so high on those, on those items.
Yeah. The way that the table works, it is. But Phil, from a contractor standpoint, for most homes in Corte Madera, if you install a heat pump, you're gonna do a panel upgrade, right?
I did not.
Not
You did not?
necessarily, not necessarily.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But from a contractor standpoint, you agree with that? You don't have, for heat?
Well, it depends on the size of the house.
And if you're doing load switching and how you're measuring actually what the load is. I've heard from electrical contractors, they want to do a panel upgrade, and thank you for the $4,000
Right.
or
Right.
more. And I have heard from a number of experts that is not always by any means,
Like Tom Cobble.
Tom Cabot. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe,
Exactly.
maybe mine was upgraded and I didn't know it because I have solar and a car plugged in.
I
And,
think
you know,
I think
so-
you're at probably an upgraded panel already.
But anyway,
Well, the only modification I think I would recommend is just calling all of the Corte Madera Zone 3.
I'd vote for bumping it up from 6.
Really? I like it.
I would too.
Well, why don't we call all of Corte Madera Zone 2?
Can't do that.
No, it's essentially the same thing.
You just change the target score to 8.
I don't think, I mean, we don't have to make a decision on that now, but I think it's something we should
We should
explore.
really, and so back to the question at hand though is, what should the exemptions or modifications be?
Okay. Well, you make the score for PV and electric ready pre-wire lower, so you could get at it.
But I
Well,
think
that's
that's
relevant.
harder to change, it's harder to change because there's,
So the scores are based on the energy savings for
Right.
each measure. So each point is 1 million BTUs of energy savings a year.
But how big is the PV array? And now,
Yeah, that's a good question.
Probably 3 kW. Something big.
One thing that we had discussed in the policy subcommittee was waiving or reducing fees to incentivize. And the question, I think one of the questions or concerns that came up in the public in the workshop was cost to fixed income or low income people. So if we're encouraging, for instance, getting a stove, getting an induction stove for health and safety, that would be something that would be very inexpensive and easy to do if you have the funds, right? But if you don't, and we want to encourage that, then that would be something I think we would want to help fixed income, low income people do. I think it's a really good argument for gas in your home being something that we would want to eliminate.
Is that separate from the compliance table or?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, you were asking, what should we consider as exemptions to or modifications, right? So
Let's just confirm what our baseline is. So it's the
that'd be
baseline,
great.
yeah, and then we can say what the exemptions are. I think that's a right way to do this. So, going back to the grid, can we go back to the grid?
Yeah.
So are we at, on column 1, cell 2 and 3, and on column 2, cell 3?
Absolutely.
With the only modification being, the only modification we've talked about is all of Corte Madera zone 3.
I think, if I may suggest that it's framed more in terms of the committee, or it sounds like, and that you're trying to figure out ways to require additional electrical energy measures or requirements beyond what sort of the compliance table or flexible compliance table for zone, the 6 points currently requires. I'm just trying to, with that, we can sort of think about ways that maybe is, without saying it's gotta be 8 or something like that. We
I
can just
agree.
think about
Yeah,
ways that sort of go a little bit further.
Yeah.
And purport, around that.
I totally agree. I think it's something to explore.
Okay, that helps us.
I think we're in agreement.
Yeah,
I don't think we have to decide today, correct me if I'm wrong, Phoebe, with or without modifications.
well, we're talking, I mean, that is what I think, what you're mentioning is a potential modification would be to just go from 6 to 8 points, but it could be.
The more clear we can be in the football we're passing on to planet, the easier it'll be. So although we don't have to decide today, the more things we can decide on, the better.
But I think that what we're saying is that needs more exploration. Can't just say,
Yeah, we can take that recommendation though. I'm trying to get what the sort of the comments and recommendations, and then we can sort of figure out maybe the best way to do that within the framework, the policy framework and the code framework that we are looking at. With right now, it's been designed through the county system, but there's a flexible compliance table. There's mandatory measures that are part of this as well. So I think it's allowing staff to sort of go back and think about the best way to sort of ratchet it up a little bit in terms of when you're in for a remodel on a single family home, and you're above the threshold, you're incentivized to do, sounds like a little bit more than what is currently required for zone 3.
right.
Who knows anymore?
Place on how they want to approach it.
Yes,
I think that's
exactly.
a very big
Those-
deal.
Or how about with a carrot and the stick? If they go beyond, can we reduce their fees?
Ah,
That's, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes, I was going there.
Like if an applicant comes in and says, I'm going to, although I'm not required to, I'm gonna get rid of my gas range. Can we incentivize that by reducing fees, or can we study that? I guess that's
We
what
can
I'm.
study that, yeah, I think.
I mean, and here, one of the quandaries I have in my head is that the biggest issue I've heard from people is they like to cook on gas. But, and so their biggest fear that they have in the remodel language or renovation language is around, don't take away my gas range. But what isn't in enough of this what isn't in this conversation enough is that it's the health issues
Right.
of gas ranges. And I don't think that people understand that.
Right.
It's like smoking packs of cigarettes when you
Right.
use your range without turning on your fan.
Right, and if it's a fan that just recirculates back into the room, which is what most of many of them are anyway.
But this gets back to the education, right? So that's not a modification we're gonna make.
We heard that big sigh.
That wasn't me.
It was me, because because I have this, taking the gas stoves away is such a hot button issue, and it's such a small contributor of greenhouse gas. I mean, you think about people doing things that are dumb for their health.
Yes.
When could we stop talking about that?
Yeah.
Never. They don't fasten their seatbelts. They, it goes on and on and on. So yes, they need education, but we're here for greenhouse gas reduction, and letting. I mean, was it in the Chronicle a week ago about the world famous chef who's giving food to all these poor people, gets shut down because he's furious about his stove? I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Let's just let them have their gas stoves, for crying out loud, and get on to the important stuff. Tell them it's bad for them. That's fine. Give them a point if they change. Incentivize them. But that's really all I have to say about that.
So exploring that, if an application comes in and achieves 20 points, can the town study reducing their fees?
Please.
So,
Can I ask how much the fee reduction would be compared to like the sign?
All that would have to be figured out,
I
right?
just want to make sure that we're researching something that's truly going to drive.
So when an application comes in of 750 square feet, how are the fees calculated? And what's the range of the fee on that 750?
that's a separate meeting on it. It's like,
Okay.
it's based, I mean, it depends what it is for. Some of our fees are flat fees, some are based on evaluation. There's plan check fees that just depends on how good your plans are and how many rounds of comments you have to go through. I mean, so Bill's been through it.
Understanding the cost of the
How much
stove,
would these
somebody
be?
might not care.
How much of this fees be on a typical 700 square foot? I couldn't tell you.
No, it's not. It's
Order
not.
of magnitude, $2,000.
No, it's more like 10 or 15, and then you have school fees.
Yeah, you have impact
Lots of
fees
stuff.
and you have that street impact. I mean,
It's
so
not much compared to an incentive unless the incentive was really huge.
So
I
the
mean, you're
permit
doing a
fees and revising the
$500,000
permit fee structure
remodel.
is something we already have on the work plan for this year, so that is gonna be.
Oh,
okay.
Later, yeah.
Because I'm intrigued. I don't know, does anybody else have an opinion that, like, if you got 20 points and for a fee reduction, does that sound like something that we're interested in?
We've been saying this for a long time. Yeah, absolutely. There monetary incentives and penalties.
And it's not so much how much it is, it's the fact that you're giving it away, that it's a benefit, it's a bonus, and it shows we put our money where our mouth is. That's what's nice about the fee reduction. That's not going to kill Corte Madera's budget, right? So
No.
I think it's just a demonstration of our faith in what we're doing as a town. So I think fee reductions for reaching 20 points or even 15 would be great.
I like that sentiment, but I also think that we might want to save the dollars for people that are
That's what I was getting at earlier, is it what's that cutoff point for low income, fixed income people? How do we support them doing what they want and or need to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of it, the response that came up in our workshop, I think one of the things to consider is like, if you're doing a 750 square foot renovation, I don't know how much of a fixed income you're on or your,
Well,
low income you are.
That was another question I had is, what is the cost per square foot of renovation in Corte Madera? Do we have some sense of what we're looking at here? Are these $20,000 jobs, 50, 70, what?
Half a
We have-
million, 500, it's.
Oh,
about-
$500,000. Okay, so now we're talking about fixed income and poor people, huh? Okay.
Well, no, I was saying rather than giving incentives and permit fees, in this case, we should reserve that pool of dollars to help people who are in fixed incomes. That's what I was saying.
where I wanted,
Right.
The pool's pretty small.
It's a separate program.
Yeah,
that
what I was
the town directs
interested in
some
exploring
resources.
was reducing the square footage threshold
yeah,
to catch more applications and then be more lenient on
the fees.
more exceptions for people that have limited means.
So the county's code does have a low income exemption for applicants who are enrolled in PG&E's care or FERA programs.
Or MCE's care, equivalent care program as
Oh,
well.
look at this.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there is that low income exemption. Those applicants would only be required to comply with the mandatory components, not the flexible compliance table.
Typical project cost is $240.
And
Yeah, so we
And
don't-
that's a bit of a low estimate. But even with that low estimate, you can see the share of project costs is the estimate there. And of course, this varies a lot by each project type.
That's not Marin County though.
This is the estimate for
It's a
Marin County.
paint,
that
that's a
was-
paint and carpet job.
Oh, yeah. It's an addition.
But did you get that? So the actual, what Phoebe was saying was that for people who qualify, you don't even get to the flexible compliance table. You're only doing the mandatory measures of the code. So it's actually a reduction in.
Does anybody want to explore going further than that?
Yeah. I mean,
yes,
Or, no, further in what way? Maybe I wasn't clear in my
no,
question.
go ahead.
I'm trying to get, a group here. Are the county's measures for people of low income enough?
Hmm.
I think that was my question. Do we want to, by the way, I'm for keeping it in alignment with the county unless we have a strong reason to
Right.
deviate. Just-
Right. I think that in spite of what the cost is, $500,000, or what Martin was saying, that we do have people who are on fixed incomes and may need to do something small. They may need to be, insulating or putting in dual pane windows because of heat. There's lots of other things that could be on the list. And so keeping the general public, the broader constituency here in Corte Madera in mind, from $1 million homes to people who are in very fixed income, I think we really need to be sensitive to that and not make assumptions. And so I'd like to keep in mind that where we can, we should be promoting, encouraging, and supporting any kind of ordinance that helps people and doesn't ignore them.
But is the county's protection of those people, is that enough, or do we need to go
I
beyond?
don't know the demographics. I don't know what the census data is in terms of socioeconomic status in Corte Madera.
Well, if they
Easy enough to
comply
find.
with the PG&E, what I understood is if they comply with the PG, if they're already
In the care
in a
program.
PG, in a care
Yeah.
program, they're exempt from some of these other measures, from the,
Right, from the flexible compliance table,
Which-
they'd still be required to install the mandatory.
to me, that seems clear,
Mhm,
and it's consistent with the county, so.
mhm.
we want to
And
go beyond that, I guess.
And there are programs like SunShares and not SunShares, programs where volunteers come to your home and they change out all your light bulbs to LEDs for free. Right, so that's something that we could also be promoting. They change, your faucet aerators to low flow and do insulation around your doors and windows. So those are programs that are available, but I don't know if people are aware of them and avail themselves of those things. Those are things I think we should be, you
I
know.
think we can advocate. I'm watching our time. We have less than 15 minutes left, so.
And we have one more topic of which I,
That's right, that's right.
and I'm not gonna be here the next, so.
All right, so I think we are in agreement that we want to go as far as we can at this point. Do we want to add more is what your question is, right? And so can we maybe do that in July when this comes back to us with real language? Is that,
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'll have, like, we're gonna take this and try to develop language. You know, I think, one question, I don't know, one question would be whether or not there's consultation, and then, I mean, we'll be taking the planning commission as well, just for
Right.
their input, on comment, hopefully on ordinance framework and some of these points that you're mentioning. And then bringing it back with more refined language.
To me, the 3 points, let's see if I can get this to be agreed to by the group here. The 3 points to me would be, we view this through the lens of the intent of the climate action plan.
that's,
Okay, that's like point number 1.
Yep.
Point number 2 is we want the lower 2 cells of column 1 and the lowest cell of column 2. And then the third point was encouraging staff to look at and planning commission to consider incentives, that financial incentives for people that come in that are high performers in some way, 15 points or 20 points. Because the goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So can the city make that, can they ease that in some way or make it at least an interesting conversation? You know, by encouraging people to earn more points. Does it, if those are the 3 points we communicated to planning and staff, is that where we are?
we haven't touched the third column yet. But yes, so far. I'm with
Didn't
you.
we say yes on that one last fall, or is that a new one?
No, it's the same as what was presented in the fall.
I think we said yes
Okay.
before. I don't
Never
think,
mind.
I'd like to go I'd like to go beyond, but I don't know.
Next year.
Next year. You know, I think having EV ready for 20% of the parking stalls seems like it's. My dad used to say, it's like kissing your sister. And it's like. It just isn't the same as real.
Yeah.
That's enough of that.
Yeah, strike that. Okay, so I don't think, I think we're in agreement on column 3. Mhm. So is that enough?
Yeah, that's helpful. Do you want to get into some of the exemption possibilities?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's see if we can motor through that.
Okay, so that's helpful as a baseline,
Yeah,
that the committee does support requiring substantial remodels to be all electric. Some of the questions that came up from the public during the workshop were whether there should be any exemptions for emergency generators, for recently installed gas appliances that are still functional, for outdoor gas appliances, or for projects where there's a, more than a 15% cost or something like that associated with being all electric. And for context, our current all electric ordinance does not have any of these exemptions.
But there are some exemptions. Well, right?
There are some exemptions,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
The exemptions are for emergency generation, only for essential services and multifamily.
Yeah.
There's a low income / hardship exemption for attached ADUs,
Yeah, and we
and
already,
exemption for food
yeah,
services.
those were with the
Yeah.
first round, so these would be additional exemptions.
Right, I think the question is specifically for the substantial
Yeah.
remodels. Would the committee consider any of?
I'll say I'm not interested in any of those exemptions.
I absolutely agree.
I think I could argue each one of those is not really being emergency, a new emergency generator rather than battery backup.
And there are portable battery generators
Yeah.
available as well, so.
I don't think any of those exemptions rise to consideration for me.
I'm in agreement.
Martin,
I would want to know how many of these we expect to encounter. You know, if there's 6 over the next 10 years, who cares? You know, we don't know what the impact is. I would say allow those. I'm for allowing those exemptions pretty much because I don't think there's going to be much of them. And it doesn't,
Sorry, go ahead, Martin.
you know, for the multi-families, for the generator backup, for the people with, you know, the health stuff. It's, you know, what's the impact there? What do we gain by, you know, annoying people with that stuff? I don't. That's my
okay,
opinion.
so let's do the flip side. So if we allowed all of these exemptions, is it moving does it make much difference? That's your point.
So for these.
Yes, it wouldn't make, again, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we've probably spent more time on what that would help than it's worth.
Yeah, because as an example, there's an outdoor gas appliance. Let's say someone just built an outdoor kitchen and they have a gas grill. And then they go to remodel their home. What we're saying is they have to tear out that outdoor kitchen.
No,
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 that's
that's
not
not
what we're saying.
They're just not allowed to.
That remodel, yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And so
so,
for these, we do actually have a better estimate because 50% is the same size as the fire sprinkler requirement, and that's about 12 projects a year that we're seeing that meet that 50% threshold that would then be required to comply with this all electric.
How many projects in total are there?
What do you, construction project?
How many
Yeah,
projects-
We have
That-
about 900 to 1,000 building permits a year.
and of those 12 meet this requirement? Is
Not all of those are remodel projects, right?
No, those are all
all-
building permits,
all-
period.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Building permits.
okay. All right,
So-
so, and there were 30 projects had met, we believe 30 projects where they're about met the 750 foot requirement, right?
Correct.
Okay, out of how many remodeling projects?
A couple hundred.
A couple of hundred.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. So that's the kind of ratio. So that's reasonably significant. Okay. All right.
So the other element to consider here is that we're thinking about how do we transition to an electric future and at some point be able to decommission gas lines and remove that source of emissions, the methane that's leaking from the gas lines. And so that's another aspect to consider when we're thinking about, you know, requiring homes to go fully electric versus allowing some mixed fuel in these situations.
So I am with Dave on this. I think that, to your point, we need to be step by step getting gas out of the community. So if it's not a high percentage anyway of permits and projects, then there's.
If, I think when we say gas now, we've been talking about natural gas that arrives to the site by a pipe.
Right, as opposed to propane.
And if an application came in, or what's keeping someone from putting in a propane generator? In that,
You know, it's not a building permit.
so the people that want to have gas for an outdoor fireplace or an emergency generator, under the strictest version of the code we're talking about, could satisfy all of that with propane.
You could do an outdoor grill right? Yeah, it's not a gas line.
So it makes me want to look at these exemptions. I'm less interested in those exemptions, given that people can do most of this with propane.
Okay. So, and I don't know the answer to this question. I'm not being a lawyer asking a question that I know the answer
Yeah.
to. What is the difference in terms of greenhouse gas emissions from piping and burning fossil gas?
Insignificant.
Thank you.
It's-
Compared to propane, I don't know what the emissions are from burning those comparative fuels.
I'm trying to follow Phoebe's line, which is let's decommission gas infrastructure.
Right,
Right. And if people really need to have a flame,
they
they can have propane.
Right,
Yeah, and like, I mean, some of us have legacy propane. It's not like I need it. I just want to be like.
The propane industry is promoting themselves as better greenhouse gas than natural, but it isn't really. They do the same CO2. It's that they have less sulfur and that sort of thing in it. So it's
And no
really
line
the
going
same.
to the house, but there's a line to the propane station.
Well, yeah, there's no line for propane. That's right.
So for the planning commission and for staff to answer Phoebe's question, do we agree that most of these measures, except for the last one, could be satisfied with propane? So we aren't interested in the exceptions?
I think it's clearer just to say no.
I think we're saying no.
Yeah, that's where I started.
Yeah, there are no exceptions, right?
And, okay,
Oh my gosh, I think we made it through your question. Did we?
Okay, so for both of those last two, we're saying the committee saying no exceptions. Okay. That's very helpful.
Now the fun stuff.
Well, we're at time, so we need to discuss.
Adam, do you have what you need?
I think so, yeah, I think we, well.
Yes, thank you.
But we have 4th of July to.
And Phoebe, I just wanted to say, great job on running that workshop and
Yes.
doing all the promotion. And,
Yes.
I sat in the second half of it and I thought it was very well done and super prepared. And so it was great.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Great job. I cut almost all of it. I was a little bit late getting on, but that was my bad. Great job. And I thought you managed the questions and the answers really well.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to see let me know when the link is fixed so that I can watch that video.
Yeah, I can send it out once it's up there again.
Please do.
Moving on. So moving on, discussion of committee preparation for the 4th of July. I struck out on my neighbor's truck.
Yes, we heard. So we, which is okay. I really appreciate you asking.
They gave it like a nanosecond of consideration.
Really? Okay, good to know for the future. I think we're at time, so I just want to be mindful of like what we could accomplish in the next 5 minutes. So I don't know, Phoebe, if you're pulling up the slides, but
Yeah.
I'm willing to stay later.
I can stay a little bit later.
I have to leave it now, but I'll leave it 5:06.
Okay. So what we have decided is, and then there's areas, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the packet, Phil, around some of the questions, but after thinking through what the participation would look like from the parade to the booth, I think we've decided it's hard to get cars. We at one point thought about, oh, maybe we could have the town cars, but that would mean Phoebe would have to drive and then we'd have to have somebody else. So while it felt good that like a good idea, I don't think we can execute on the parade this year. So that means that we would have a presence in the park. And some of the things we wanted to run by this group is, who can volunteer? What does that, you can, great.
I can volunteer.
Or do you have times that you can volunteer?
I don't know. I have to look at my calendar, but I don't see
Okay.
why
I looked at my calendar.
I should.
Okay,
It should
so
not be a problem.
I'm gonna come back around to both of you on that.
Okay.
One of the things that we've been working on, and this came from feedback from one of our volunteers and also the resident that came into our last meeting that said, hey, we should have his checklist was not about purchasing. And so we wanted to see, can we expand our checklist to include the things that we have been promoting around EV adoption and electrifying your home, but also, eating less meat or, using your appliances and using energy just in general less. So we started off on creating this checklist, which I would love the committee's feedback on. Do we like the idea of a checklist? And then we can talk a little bit about what's on there. It won't be new stuff. The idea would be in our booth, we would be promoting this checklist. It would also go live on our site. It would share what the impact is that the resident could have on our goals as a committee and as a town. Although that's a little murky at this point in terms of how we'll get there, but we have some ideas. And then we would have banners that would highlight maybe 3 of these actions that we would use in the park, but then we could also use around town after the 4th of July. And it would include a QR code and in a small URL to send them to our Climate Action Committee page. There are messages that we would like to include on things like the banners and buttons. I think we could probably make the call on that if we can't do that as a group. But in a nutshell, let's see, I have 1 or 2 minutes left. You can volunteer, but what are the thoughts on the checklist overall? Do people like that idea
Yes.
as our way of educating?
Yes.
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 Yeah, I think I would channel Martin a little bit and say, because I get questions about what can I do that would really be impactful?
Go to my website.
Go ahead. So can we, instead of encouraging measures that are easy, can we include measures can we help people understand what is the most impactful thing you could do?
Yeah, and I think
And I think that we already do that.
we do that in the messaging at the table, but I think this includes those biggest ones. So we can still message that, hey, transportation, energy in the home are
Right.
the biggest contributors, but also so is food choices. Like
Yep.
just because we're not measuring it and it's not in our cap in terms of the table, well, it's in the cap, but
It's
it's
in the
not. But we
Right,
don't
it's not
have
in
a
the
measure
inventory.
for it in terms of what the impact is.
So
That's significant.
I'm advocating for something really simple like EV and a heat pump. Heat pump for space heating are the 2 things that are most impactful.
Mhm. So that's on there.
And that's on there. Yeah.
Replace a gas appliance with a heat pump appliance, and
Yeah.
then we would say, so it's.
I'm in agreement. I just think that some people like simplicity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, if it takes 3 sentences, it's too much, it's like, what can I do? Here's the 2 things.
So we've been going with the 2 things, which are energy and
Yeah.
transportation, and I think the feedback we're getting is we need things that don't require expenditure.
Yeah.
It's a place to start.
And lifestyle changes. I think we want both. I'm saying both.
Yeah.
Bring your own bag.
Well, no, it's, you know.
If you touch it every day,
we
it gets you
can't
thinking about
It's,
maybe.
and we can't cover everything, right?
Right. But speaking of bags, having a Corte Madera climate action reusable marketing bag would be great.
I agree. And so we've talked about giveaways. So we've priced out some giveaways. We have not included bags, but that might be something to think about. Phoebe's been great about reaching out to all of our partners and having them donate stuff for our booth, so we can continue to do that.
Zero Waste Marin and the county parks and open space have great.
Yeah.
Great swag.
Giveaways that have the longest utility
Yes.
would be the things that I would be advocating for. Things that have a messaging like a button, but don't have utility past that, I would be less
Excited about.
desiring of,
Mhm.
just because it just becomes space.
Yeah. Phoebe, how can I collect feedback in a way that honors what we need to do as a group to get this completed, but also thinks about the Brown Act?
Yeah, so I can collect the feedback and
Okay,
and.
Or we could just empower you to go force.
Well, so I know this committee has lots of feedback, so what I am suggesting, and Phil, I'll send you a note on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I need to
thank you
run,
for
I'm sorry.
volunteering. No, no, no.
Can I
please do.
introduce something? So that we can I introduce something? Are you done?
No, go ahead.
Because if we don't introduce this EV thing, we can't talk about it next time.
No, that's not the case. And I think it's just Phil that needs to.
So Phil could leave.
The forum's gone, right?
We have Martin.
Oh, we have Martin. Okay, sorry, Martin.
Don't forget.
Are you?
No, I have one last thought here,
Okay,
which is if, Phil, I'll send you an email, so you,
thanks. Okay.
is there's a slide in here, and it's questions for the committee. If everyone could just take time to answer those questions and email them to Phoebe, that would be great. Great. Then we know we're all on board with the checklist. We like the message. Everybody gets to say on what this is gonna look like, and then I would ask that if you could get that to her by the end of next week, that would be great, because then
No
we can
problem.
start putting it all together.
Can do,
Great,
absolutely.
thank you. Introduce
Okay,
the
so-
way. Wait, hold on one second. Martin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, but I love the idea of the bag and the utilities of the giveaways.
Great.
Phoebe, going back to the agenda, discussion of SB 379.
That was a request from Leslie, so.
Well, at next meeting perhaps, it's
Sure, of course,
being
that's-
voted on this week, as far as I know. I don't know where it is in committee at this moment.
379.
37, I'm sorry, 379. Yeah, I'm not prepared to go into depth on that right at the moment.
So push it out to next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion of how to connect with property owners considering renovations.
That was Amy.
Yeah.
On the.
We don't have time. We can push it to probably not, I won't be here next meeting, so July.
Is this more than the workshopping that the town is doing? What is the topic?
We've talked about it a couple times in our meetings. It's just how are we connecting with residents before they create their plans and apply for it, because by then it's too late. So
That's something, but is this something that we would do? We could have this be tied to the discussion about renovations, but this is something we could ask that town staff are doing anyway, right? And can we decouple these, the two discussions?
well, I don't think, I think the point is more general in that if somebody is doing a renovation, we catch them too late right now when they come to the desk and file their permit. So like it requires more of a discussion of what are those entry points and how do we get them earlier on in the process. So I don't see it as two separate things, but I'm happy to attack it any way you want when we bring it up.
Well,
next.
I think if we, in my view, communicating with people as early as possible is good, it is desirable, no matter what the outcome is in August.
Oh, yeah, that's what I think
Yeah.
what we're saying.
Okay, we're saying the same thing.
I think we are. We've talked about this a couple
Right.
times.
Yes, and
So
that could also be a subcommittee project to do some brainstorming and bring it back to the full committee. You want to get started on it before the next meeting.
Adam, does staff talk about greenhouse gas reductions when people come in early on?
It's not something that's integrated necessarily into our every conversation with applicants, I wouldn't say. We have information now, thanks to Phoebe at the counter, but it's not like we're trying to persuade people who have a project already when they're coming in to switch their appliance.
I think that the climate action plan is a lever for us on this, is that at least we could bring the climate action plan into the conversations earlier. I think that's your gate, that's your gateway.
I think, yeah, and I think there certainly are opportunities, especially the reach code will be a good opportunity to educate folks at the counter, even if their current project that they're doing isn't less than, let's say, a fund, but it's an opportunity then to say, you know, these are whatever you're doing, you're aware for your next project, or
Yeah, here's the compliant, like if you're thinking about how you can
yes,
contribute, here's a compliance list that you should think about.
I think there's that opportunity. You know, there's other idea. I agree. There's other ideas out there that you can do more of a awareness sort of work, you know, need some sort of event or something like that, what might draw people to it. But you know, website information where people can, if they're looking on our website for building permit information, there's information linking to our climate action web page or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Or we could look at all the permits and the architects and the contractors and do outreach to that
Yeah.
group of people and
That's a
say,
great idea,
hey,
too.
we're having a little event, or, you know, so.
There's lots of things. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. Get to the design community and get them to start to incorporate those sorts of ideas into their projects at that stage. That's usually the first.
And that would be
Place that.
countywide ultimately, right? It wouldn't just be Corte Madera doing that sort of outreach. That should be something that is through the, you know.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of venues for that already. I know there's a Marin building.
Right, building
group that
association,
they
yeah.
have had some presentations on electrification.
But we could test it in the group that meets with all the climate action. They could roll it out
Mhm.
through their climate action. So that's why I say, let's keep it as a topic for maybe a couple months out.
Okay.
Okay,
So back to 379 for half a second. Are we a charter town, city? No. Okay, so I don't think it applies to us.
That's the automated solar. permitting
Yeah,
requirement,
exactly.
And it does apply, and we are,
And we are,
Right,
okay, it does
apply.
apply. Okay, I thought,
yeah,
hang on. I'm reading this on my phone, so.
what did you just say, Phoebe? That it does apply and
it
we
does
are,
apply, and it's on the work plan.
Okay.
The town's received a grant to help with compliance for that. And
That's
that'll
good.
be starting next year.
okay,
Okay,
Awesome.
should we move on to item 5? Okay?
Yeah.
Any staff updates, reports?
Just a quick one to let you know that this last agenda notification was the last time any of you should have gotten an email on your personal email from me. We're going to be switching to using all of only the town email addresses. So I think everyone is on their town email address now, but please let me know if there's still any issues there. And then just a note on meeting attendance, if you're planning on missing any meetings in the summer, I know Amy and Martin have already let me know. But if you have any trips planned and you're going to miss meetings, please let me know so I make sure you have a quorum here in Corte Madera.
Okay, any committee member updates or reports before we get to subcommittees?
I was just gonna ask, based on me and Martin, do you have enough people for those
Yes.
meetings? Okay.
We just need to have a quorum within these limits.
Has anyone attended any of the climate action, that
Jody meeting?
Jody Tim's group? Yeah, it would be so good if we could do that.
I know. I hear you.
That's a community group that is working, trying to bring representatives from all of the cities. Whoever's on the sustainability committee or,
It's not something I can do in the next couple months, but I'm happy to revisit it
yeah.
in August or September.
Yeah, I have a conflicting meeting at the same time. That's why I haven't been able to go. But I would.
What is the date and the time? What are the,
It's like a Thursday at 3:30 or something. And it's maybe the third Thursday that off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure, but.
And it's representatives from climate action committees across. the
can you
board.
re-push it to me?
Of course.
Before I say I can't. I'm trying to reduce my promises. But maybe. Ad hoc subcommittees, anything from you, Amy, that we didn't cover?
No.
So the policy, can I introduce my policy? So the policy subcommittee did an assessment and created recommendations for locations for EG charging stations in Corte Madera. So we looked at some recommendations for private property as well as public property.
Nice.
And so just to paraphrase myself here, we need more EV charging stations at shopping centers. And so the Nugget Market was recommended for one. And the town center obviously was recommended some. And then
Some.
yeah, and then Park Madera Center on Tamalpais Drive, where the pet club is and the bank is. And then the marketplace at Tamil Vista, where Book Passages, all of those were candidates for approaching ownership. The recommendation for commercial institutions, office complexes were the Corte Madera Plaza in Tamil Vista, Aegis on Paradise, the Water District on Tamil Vista, Marin Suites on, and the Best Western Inn. Also the Small Business Center at Four-Way Light, founded by Magnolia, Tamalpais, Redwood, and Montecito. And various locations, various open parking area at property adjacent to 101, bounded by Coke. Is it Coach? Oh, Coke, Paradise Drive, and Madera del Presidio. So those are the office, and then recommendations for public installations. And this is where the town can do it more easily. Was Corte Madera Town Park, minimum of 2 charging stations at 1 or 2 locations each. The parking lot on the southeast, and then the west parking lot. Menke Park was identified as a place for at least 2 charging stations. San Clemente Park, and in the Corte Madera Larkspur School District, the town should approach and encourage Corte Madera Lark School District to install at least 2 charging stations at each of the sites owned by CMLSD located in Corte Madera. And then we just identified that there's a really good example of an installation in back of the Bonner Shopping Center. Have you been there? I was blown away. They actually have a place where you can sit down. It's so nice. Yeah, and so convenient. So now that I've kind of read this in, is this something we can agendize now?
Yeah, absolutely.
The next time? Okay, then we can have a slower conversation about it.
Yeah, I think this is great. Thank you to the policy subcommittee for working on this.
I get to keep that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I think
Now
it's in the
that I've
packet,
read it.
Yeah, it's in the
Oh,
packet.
it's in the package.
but not in color.
So is that it for subcommittee reports?
I'm with you on same subcommittee, so you
Yeah,
just gave the
okay.
reports, and I think we're good.
Future agenda items, I guess we just identified a couple. Is there anything else for future?
I think for the next meeting, which will be June 21st, and get the EV charging station siting discussion and possibly a presentation. And then we're gonna move or did we still want to move the discussion of SB 379, or did our discussion earlier? cover?
Maybe you could just update us. I mean, what you said is we're doing it, right? So
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Just have that be a status report, that'd be great.
Okay, there won't be any change. I'm not anticipating working on it for the next meeting.
One of the things that the county has done that in communicating about climate action has been to say, what's the county doing? What are we doing? And making that really big. You know, like what's happening? What have we initiated? What have we accomplished? I think that, you know, when we're asking the community to do stuff, I think it's really good to show that the town is walking its talk. And I know it's embedded, but I'd like to see that sort of thing kind of to, you know, as we do education and outreach.
Communication about that, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
it gets
hey,
buried.
we're not just asking you,
Yeah,
we're doing this, and you guys are, I mean, we have amazing staff. And leadership on the council, so I think that we need to shine the light on what the municipal challenges have been and what the successes have been.
It's a great idea. We can get it for presentation. or-
And why can't we do the car in the parade?
When Phoebe, when you did the work plan for us, when you did develop that work plan, when you developed the work plan for us, you went to the climate action plan and you identified where the town, what the town's progress is on that climate action plan. I kind of interpreted that as you like, this is your purview, this is your job to see that, you know. Do you think that and this is a question for the group, do we communicate to the public our progress on the climate action plan? Enough?
Yeah, I think that's a good question.
We have such a turnout.
I know. Yeah, and sent a postcard to everybody in town regarding
I
the
know.
workshop and the meeting.
I know.
Yeah, but I think that's a good question of how that can be communicated better. And there is now that information on the website, there's a page about what the town is doing.
Yeah, because instead of just the conversation about being, taking away people's gas appliances, no, what is our progress? How do we report out to the public? What is our progress on our climate action plan?
Greenhouse gas emission reduction,
Yeah.
inventory and ordinances and what that equals compared to business as usual.
In a sentence or two.
Or two.
Yeah.
Bullet points.
Maybe that's just a discussion for next meeting. How do we communicate the progress, the good progress that the town is making on their climate action plan? Rather than just the conversation, like I wish that the workshop would have started off by describing.
It did. I had
It did,
to sign
okay,
off.
good. Okay, I wasn't there. That's great. That's great. So you're already one step ahead. So that's
For those 9
Shall we-
people.
Yeah.
Close out the meeting?
adjourned. Yes, I'll adjourn this meeting. Adjourned.